Kami mababayaran, wala daw bayad yung aming services kahapon kung hindi namin isa-summarize what happened yesterday. Now, I don't know if you can see, tingnan nyo, hindi na kami pwedeng gumamit dito. Sideline na lang kami dahil day 2 na ngayon eh. Pwede po kayang pakipatay yung ilaw doon para makita naman natin yung picture namin doon. Ayan, kill the light. Ayan. Good morning! The first day, ito po yung summary kahapon. Ang title nung araw na yon, yesterday, was The Need for Renewal and Ongoing Formation given by our keynote speaker. Ayan, nakikita naman natin siguro kahit na nasa likod kayo. Ano? Our speaker for yesterday, today, and tomorrow would be Father Noel Deslate from the Archdiocese of Capiz. I did not elaborate anymore on his credential, but I remember he told us he resides now at the retirement house at the Archdiocese. The summary proceedings, I divided the summary of the day into basically two parts. The first is the summary proceedings. The session started at 9:30 a.m. sharp, Davao time. This is a national convention of Episcopal Vicars of Clergy from all over the country with the other members of the Diocesan Commission on Clergy from different dioceses. The basic format of the session was 9:30 to 10 a.m. 30 minutes lang. Talk or input proper. 10 to 10:30 was question and answer, which continued until 10:45. Father Noel was generous enough to allow us to have a working merienda. But at 10:45 to 11, we had a full break. Jingle, pahinga. And then at 11 to 12, nag-resume with the second part of the session, which was the facilitated conversation using the talk show format with audience participation. Kumbaga ay interactive. The second part was the content. Anong mga natutunan at ano ang mga message. The talk, which was only 30 minutes, brief but covered the essential points to drive the speaker's message, the importance and need for ongoing formation for priests. Quote-unquote, indispensable requirement in the life of every priest and in his exercise of his priestly ministry. He mentioned two dimensions of this ongoing formation. The updating about skills and knowledge, and renewal, which is the formation of the whole person, integral formation through personalized accompaniment. The biblical foundation was from 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 14 to 15. Do not neglect the gift you have. Hence, the church says so. That is the reason why we are having this formation, ongoing formation. Not only consecrated by the Father, nor sent by the Son, but continuously animated by the Holy Spirit. St. Paul wrote in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 6, I remind you to rekindle the gift of God that is within you. Rekindle, meaning stir to flame. Father Noel mentioned 3 common blocks. reasons for resistance to ongoing renewal program among priests. One, having had enough attitude. Sawa na. Tapos na ang formation after the seminary formation. Two, I do not need it attitude. Wala naman akong problema eh. Bakit ako kukuha niyan? Three, I have no time attitude. I'm too busy. Talo ako dyan. Wala nang kita. Babayad ka pa. In the question and answer portion, which if you will notice almost 1/3 also of the time was allotted to question and answer. Most of the sharing, comments, reactions, suggestions revolve around the experiences and learnings on ongoing formation among the priests associated with Galilee experience of its renewal or ongoing formation program, which initially had a negative effect on the priests and bishops because it was associated with problematic cases of priests and religious. Questions like, galing ka ba sa Galilee? Bakit? May problema ka ba? Hence, during the facilitated conversation from 11 to 12, that's an hour, actively participated by the participants and very well clarified by the panelists, Monsignor Allen of Parañaque, Father Nato of Lucena, and Father Jerry of Tuguegarao, the issues on the negative understanding of renewal program among priests were clarified and answered. If the objective of the day, one, and the speaker's input is to stress and to point out the necessity of ongoing formation, it was achieved and it was done. It was not only accepted, there was already many suggestions on how to go about it in their own dioceses, in the region, and in the national level, although it will be taken on the third day by the speaker. Some very important points, suggestions came out. Need for spiritual direction, even after the seminary formation. Sharing of senior clergy on their experiences, how they survive. Some for 44 years, 35 years in the ministry. My personal reflection on this was, pwede naman tayong matutong lumangoy. Kahit na initsa lang tayo sa tubig. But there is a more scientific way of swimming and surviving. That is the ongoing formation. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. It is also my task to introduce to you the moderator for the second day from the Diocese of Romblon, Father Javik. Take it away.
Thank you, Father Cesar. We would like to acknowledge their excellencies, Most Reverend Jerry Afabli of Digos, Most Reverend Bishop-elect Abel C. Apigo, and Most Reverend Bishop Raul Dael Of course, our Most Reverend Ben Famadico, the Chairman of CBCP Commission on the Clergy. And the talk of our speaker today is about the importance of communion in the sacramental fraternity of priests. Yesterday's one suggestion, because of the dearth of spiritual director, is friendship. No? I think our speaker, Father Noel, will enlighten us more. Not so much to add to his credential, but to plug in, Father Noel Dislati is also in charge of the CBCP Eclair formation for 1 year. So he will be directing the formation for 1 year of ministers for ministers. No? And it will start on May 1. So if you are interested to avail of this formation, it will be held at Mater Maria, Santa Maria Mater et Regina Seminary at Rojas City. So just inform our CBCP Executive Secretary, Monsignor Ramon Mascolino. And without much ado, we welcome again Father Noel Dislati. Let us give him a round of applause.
Salamat, Father J. Vic. No? Father J. Vic is from the Diocese of Romblon. Preparing for this second talk was indeed a delight for me because, when you talk about diocesan clergy, you talk about autonomous living, independent lifestyle, living alone, working alone. In some cases, doing alone because you think you know it all. No? And yet today we are reflecting on the importance of communion in sacramental fraternity, the common life of the diocesan clergy. And that's why I was really delighted to reflect on this topic. When we talk about communion, first and foremost, I would like to dissociate it with mere from the idea of groupism or cliques. We are not just simply talking about here of people wanting to come together because they feel or they share the same interests or sentiments. When we talk about communion, we need to root it first with our communion with the Trinity. And the documents of the church are very clear about this. If you refer, for example, the New Ratio and even the two directories of the life and ministry of the priests, they're saying that the sacramental communion of the clergy is really rooted in the communion with the Trinity. So the communion of the priest is fulfilled above all with his relationship with the Father, who is the ultimate origin of all his power. The communion of the priest is also fulfilled with his communion with the Son, in whose redemptive mission he participates, and with the Holy Spirit, who gives him the power for living and fulfilling that pastoral charity. The old directory and life and ministry of the priest is in fact saying, from paragraphs 3 to 10, saying that the identity, the ministry, and the existence of the priest are essentially related to these divine persons, to the three divine persons for priestly service to the church. Okay. And that communion with the Trinity is expressed in his communion with the church. So words like the communion with the Trinity is extended or incarnated, or sometimes is continued, or it's the sacrament, of that communion with the Trinity is His communion with the church. And of course, here we are not just simply talking about church as an abstract institution, but concretely speaking, when we're talking about communion with the church, we're talking about the communion of the priest with the Pope, with his bishop. Okay? And then eventually, that communion is also extended or continued with his communion with the presbyterate. We know that the documents are saying that by virtue of the sacrament of holy orders, each priest is united to the other members of the priesthood by specific bonds of apostolic charity, ministry, and fraternity. In fact, he is inserted into the Ordo Presbyterorum, the order of the presbyterate, constituting that unity which can be defined as a true family in which the ties are not of flesh and blood, but come from the grace of the Holy Spirit. Okay? So we know that this is a theological truth that has what? Juridical character. I do not know if that's the right term. Bishop Afable is here. He's a canon lawyer, and he's giving me a thumbs up. So I'm using the right term. It's a theological truth that has a juridical character. But when I was reflecting again on the documents, I came across on the paragraph 87 of the new ratio, the gift of priestly vocation. And I'd like to quote that. The sacramental fraternity is a valuable help for the ongoing formation of priests. It's very interesting because it contextualizes formation as an interpersonal event. It is not something that happens in isolation, but always in relation to others. Indeed, the journey towards discipleship requires constant growth in charity, which is the synthesis of priestly perfection. And this cannot be achieved in isolation, since priests form one presbyterate whose unity is made of bonds of apostolic charity, ministry, and brotherhood. Of course, yesterday we were talking about relationship as something that is formative. When you reach out to your people, and that experience in itself is formative. When we relate with ourselves by doing some introspection or reflection, that is formative. When we pray and relate to God more intimately, that is very formative. But the document is also saying that when we relate to our fellow priests, especially to the presbyterate, that is something that is very formative. So formation is an interpersonal event. It does not happen in isolation. And I'm sure you could further elaborate this by using a lot of what we've learned in theology, or even in philosophy. When we talk about person as a relational term, we actualize or fulfill our personhood always in relation to the other. But what also really struck me when I was reflecting on that paragraph 18 of the new ratio, it continued by saying, the intimate sacramental fraternity of priests is the first manifestation of charity, as well as the first place in which it can grow. Okay, there's so many things here. I'd like first to say that it's the first manifestation of charity. Our sacramental fraternity is the first manifestation of charity. That before we even reach out to other people, when we do our mission for others, make sure that there must be sacramental fraternity. And I think this is something that is connected with our theological reflection on communion, and mission. That our mission is just an overflowing of our communion. So the document is very clear in saying that sacramental fraternity is the first manifestation of charity. And this is also the first place in which it can grow. That's why formation is an interpersonal event. Another thing that I was really excited when I was reflecting on this paragraph 18, it says the intimate sacramental fraternity. I remember when we were having our training with Father Peter Lechner, a servant of the Paraclete and a clinical psychologist, when we were reflecting on the different documents of the church, especially on the common life of the priesthood, he was cautioning us not to use the word intimate. Because he said that, well, we don't use, it seems that the church is very cautious in using the word intimate. Because contemporary society would usually equate it with something romantic or anything that is sexual. No? So it's almost like inappropriate to say, I am intimate with my fellow priests, because that would connote something romantic or sexual. And indeed, it's true. If you look at the documents of the church, we use the term brotherhood, fraternity, friendship, but the documents do not use intimacy. That's why when I saw it for the first time, and mind you, I saw it only last night, Ratio Fundamentalis uses the word intimate sacramental fraternity. I think this is an important development in the documents of the church, because while we know and accept that this is a theological truth, it's important that it will be translated as an experience. We know that, we just simply have to be clear when we use the word intimacy, intimate sacramental fraternity. We should dissociate it with how contemporary society would use it. We know that etymologically it came from the Latin word intimus, which means what? It means the innermost within me. And therefore, when we talk about intimacy, at the heart of intimacy is self-disclosure, mutual self-disclosure of what is most within me. And that sacramental fraternity could only be an experience, a factual experience, when there is a disclosure, a mutual disclosure of what is most within me. Jesus said, I call you friends because I've told you everything. And I think that is at the heart of intimate sacramental fraternity. The presbyterate is the privileged place where the priest should be able to find specific means of formation. Yes, now we know that the proper context of formation is in the community, in the presbyterate. It's also the privileged place for sanctification and evangelization. And it says here, and be helped to overcome the limits and weaknesses proper to human nature. He will therefore make effort to avoid living his priestly service in an isolated and subjectivist manner, and will seek to promote fraternal communion of giving and receiving from priest to priest. The warmth, friendship, the caring assistance, the acceptance, and fraternal correction. Well aware that the grace of the order takes up and elevates the human and the psychological bonds of affection and friendship. The ecclesial sense of the presbyterate, therefore, fosters the personal responsibility of each priest in carrying out that particular ministry. And I think, and that is again explicitated in the new ratio, that our profound and ecclesial sense of the presbyterate does not hamper, but actually fosters personal responsibility of each priest in carrying out the particular ministry entrusted to him by the bishop. And therefore, the capacity to cultivate and live up priestly friendships proves to be a source of serenity and joy in the exercise of the ministry. It is also a decisive form of support in times of difficulties. It is also a valuable help for growth in the pastoral charity, which the priest must exercise in a particular way towards those conferers in difficulty and in need of understanding, assistance, and support. Isn't it that among us, when there is friendship, we know when people are in difficult situations, and we can easily reach out to them? I also heard a sharing from Monsignor Jing, from the Diocese of San Carlos. He was saying that he heard from Bishop Ambo that in the diocese, for example, of Caloocan, they were saying that there is a support system where every week or during their day off, they would come together and share on the gospel, which is a valuable help for their preparation for what? They do actually Lectio Divina. And in doing that together, it's a valuable help for their preparation for preaching the following Sunday. So when there is really an ecclesial sense, it really fosters our personal responsibility in carrying out our priestly responsibility instead of hampering it. Now, the new ratio is also clear in explicitating to us the different expressions of sacramental fraternity that I think is consonant to the spirituality and lifestyle of the diocesan clergy. And what are these? Okay, well, first, ratio is saying, and this is in paragraph 18, it says fraternal meetings. Meetings for common prayers, sharing and discussion of theological or pastoral themes, or sharing a ministerial endeavors, helping one another, or simply spending time together. I know that some of you would say, well, we already have structures like that in the diocese. But I think we need to ask questions like, what is the quality of these meetings? Are they sources for ongoing formation? Are they sources for sanctification and evangelization for us? Is it something that, when we meet, we feel uplifted spiritually, and it is something that is enriching for our pastoral ministry? Or is it a venue where we just simply do business meeting? Or is this a venue where we do just simply the drinking sessions or the gossiping, about others' weaknesses and faults? Fraternal meetings are important, and yet we need to make sure that the quality of these meetings are indeed in consonant to our expression of our sacramental fraternity. Spiritual direction and confession came out again as an important expression of that sacramental fraternity. Of course, we have so many questions about this. I think everyone agrees that it is an important expression of our sacramental fraternity. But we need to entertain practical questions like what? How open are we for ongoing spiritual directions? How many of us here, Vicars for Clergy, are availing ongoing spiritual direction? How many of us are availing regular confession? So do we have an open disposition for this? We know that when we talk about spiritual direction, it is important that it has to have certain kind of regularity, because spiritual direction is not just simply problem solving. I think spiritual directors would agree to that. Ma'am Sinch, Eva Galvey would agree to that this is not about problem solving. So you don't just simply go for spiritual direction if you have problems. This is really oriented towards growth of forming a discerning heart. Of course, questions like, do we have trained, credible, approachable, as Monsignor Nonoy was saying, accessible spiritual directors around us? If not in our diocese, is there a possibility to exchange resources as we were talking about yesterday? So these are questions that we need to, practical questions that we need to answer. Retreats, okay? Well, this is something that we are already doing. But I just would like to highlight the idea that remember that retreats are different from seminar on spiritual themes. And I myself am a spiritual director, and I know the difference between a seminar and a retreat. In a seminar, you can talk about spirituality. You can talk about spiritual matters. And yet, it's all about just simply rumination of those beautiful themes. And yet, when we talk about retreat, it's actually a facilitation of that personal encounter with the Lord. And some of our retreats are not like that. It's just simply a seminar on spiritual things. That's why we need, again, to look for retreat facilitators who could really facilitate that encounter, rather than just simply talking fluently or impressively of a spiritual topic. Of course, there are also practical questions like who will give the retreats? You know, it's very difficult to find retreat facilitators or even just simply speakers. Why? Because many of us are afraid to talk to fellow priests like this. Yeah? It's really very difficult. That's why maybe you also ask, how come I have developed this confidence in talking to you? Honestly speaking, every time I start, I would still feel anxious. But one of the things that really helped me in talking to priests is that realization that I don't know everything. That when people ask me certain things, it's because, well, I know something, but if they ask me something that I don't know, then I would readily say, I'm sorry, I do not know that. And that gave me the confidence to talk to you. And I hope, I'm sharing this because I hope that when your fellow priests would invite you for retreats and talks, don't pretend that you know everything, because we don't. Just simply go there and share your thoughts, your experience. And then just simply say, I'm sorry, I don't know that. And I think if you have that disposition, that humble disposition, then you would be able to talk to your fellow priests. There are also questions like, of course, the quality of our retreats. Okay. Father Atom, can you help me with this one? How would you put this down? Ito lang. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. This one here. And then? Here? There we go. Okay. Okay. This is a MacBook. Okay. We also have to ask questions about the conducive atmosphere of our retreats. I know that there are some retreats that drinking, playing mahjong, doing night outs are part of the routine. It's very sad to know that whenever we are gathered in a national level and we are in big cities like Manila, Cebu, or Davao, it could even be occasions for sin. No? I've seen stories about that. And that's why even though we do retreats, sometimes we need to ask questions, realistic questions. What's really happening in these retreats? Are they really formative? No? Are they really formative? Common table, sharing meals together. We were told in the seminary that when priests who live together in one rectory do not eat together, there's something wrong. Okay? There's something wrong about their sacramental fraternity. Common life, shared house arrangement. We know that there are many advantages of this, but of course there are also advantages, especially when there are what? When priests are not able to live in common. Personality problems. When they don't have the social skills for conflict resolutions. Okay? And priestly associations, movements, secular institutes, or third order memberships, etc. And this, we know, is left to the initiative of the priest. I think this afternoon's workshop will be all about this, no? There will be some associations and movements that would come in to invite you to join them. And it's interesting because canon law has supported by stipulating provisions in the canon law to really encourage us, a common life, a certain kind of common life, and even of joining priestly associations. Canon 280, it says, some manner of common life is highly recommended to clerics. Where it exists, it is as far as possible to be maintained. And then also in Canon 278, it says that joining priestly associations and movements have to be held in high esteem. Okay? Now, so far we have been talking about intimate sacramental fraternity. But how does this really look like in the concrete, in the experiential level? I'd like to outline here some of the elements of intimate sacramental fraternity in the presbyterate. Number one, it shows our capacity to commit oneself to a particular individuals in relationships that last over time, even though those relationships may call for significant sacrifice and compromise. My experience with priests, with priests, at least when I was in Galilee Center, was that I would always ask their social life. To whom do you go out when you have your day off? Do you have friends? Are you committed to certain individuals? I think intimate sacramental fraternity is expressed in that commitment to particular individuals in relationship that last over time. One of the things that helped me survive when I was studying outside the country is my capacity for establishing and maintaining relationships. One of the great things I think that happened to me when I was in the US was to be able to maintain an intimate friendship with a priest, with a white Caucasian priest who was living with me in the parish. At some point, we were transferred to different places, and so I was in the western part of Washington, D.C., and he was in the eastern part of Baltimore. It's actually a 3-hour drive. But part of the commitment to that relationship is to drive 3 hours, no, and another 3 hours going back. And what do we do? Well, on weekends, I just simply have to drive, or he driving to my place. We eat together. We watch movies together. While eating dinner, we talk. Just that. Now that I am back to the diocese, I have to reestablish friendships. And right now, I am committed to a relationship in which every Friday I would go to the parish of this priest friend of mine to just simply concelebrate with him. And after concelebrating, we just simply would go out to take breakfast together and then just simply talk. Who is your friend? To whom are you going out with? You know, when you say, well, I'm a friend of everybody, but tell me their names, and you cannot even mention a name. Maybe really you don't have any intimate friendship. Maybe you are a social butterfly, but not someone who knows someone, really someone. Is neither suffocating nor disinterested, but is rooted in mutuality and equality in friendship. It involves the sharing of one's inner self in detail and in depth, because that is intimacy. Intimacy is disclosing what is most within me. And when I was talking about the difficulty of accepting my residence, the first one I shared that too was with this friend. She was sharing what is even most disturbing in me. Involves strength of character that supports such commitments. Involves being able simultaneously to maintain one's personal integrity to meet the accompanying demands for change. And it is a challenge to deeper personal growth. You know, when we talk about intimate sacramental fraternity, it's almost like we tend to romanticize the whole thing, but it's not. In real relationship, sometimes you disagree with each other. Sometimes, you know, when you've learned to be honest with each other, you could be very upfront with each other, but it does not break the relationship. But how do men connect? Forming deep, intimate friendship is a rare experience for many of us. And I think it is gender specific because men are friendly rather than intimate, as they would say, in their relationships. Why? Because they connect much more through activity and specific roles that seem socially sanctioned or prescribed. It seems much easier for men to share activities such as sports than their inner selves. That's why if we're talking about intimate fraternal, sacramental fraternity, it has something to be intentional on our part. Why? Because our style for relating with one another is, as they would call it, instrumental style. That is based on providing practical help, sharing physical activities, spending time together, providing security, being responsible for someone's well-being, or providing material things, but not about disclosing what is most within me. That's why in order for us to arrive to that kind of friendship, we have to be intentional in our self-disclosure. Of course, the cultural socialization process made it difficult for us. Why? Because there are some expressions of affection that we labeled as feminine qualities, like the expression of emotions, like the limited range of tactile expressions of emotions. And for some men, becoming affectionate with other men triggers some uncomfortable or frightening feeling, which we call homophobic feelings. That's why there is almost like a natural tendency to avert from intimate relationship. And yet we know that the one that really blocks us from intimate priestly friendship is our fear of trusting one another with our real self. There seems to be that fear, especially for those people who have past experiences of having been betrayed. No, it's very difficult for them anymore to trust, to be vulnerable. Barriers like failure to look within and deepen our capacity for intimate connections has led to increased isolation, loneliness, and stress. Somebody was talking about for us to be able to share our true self to others, it requires our ability to look within us. For us to be able to connect intimately with others, it requires a capacity to be able, it requires affective maturity to be able to look into yourself so that you will be able to share it to others. Many of us men, some of you don't believe that we are men, no? Failure to look within and to deepen our capacity for intimate relationship has led to increased isolation, loneliness, and stress, which in effect could lead to unhealthy copings like alcohol or drug abuse, workaholism, sexual addictions, and other kinds of compulsions. Many of us have looked for love in the wrong place and found ourselves still wanting. Another thing that I think is important to mention is another barrier for intimate, deep friendship is the lack of solitude. You know, men have the tendency to run away from our fears, from our resentments, from our sadness, from our worries. Rather than taking them into prayer, into solitude with God, we run away from them. Unfortunately, this keeps us from our center. And when you are not rooted in your center, it's very difficult to share to others, or it's almost impossible to share to others. Remember that intimacy is a gift, is a grace. In prayer, we bring our whole selves, body, mind, heart, asking for the courage to grow in honest self-awareness and to remove those obstacles and defects of character that inhibit our growth. Common barriers to intimate friendship in the subculture of a presbyterate. This is just my observation from the many times that I have encountered priests in different dioceses. Mistrust due to playing favorites or belonging to the circle of the bishop. Pasipsipan. Gossiping or backbiting. Crab mentality, laglagan. Betrayal of confidence, etc. So, it actually comes from mistrust. Individualism as a coping to mistrust. Because we have mistrusted each other, it leads us to individualism. Kayo-kayo, kami-kami mentality. Or parochial mentality. Kayo lang dyan, at least dito ako, sa parokya ko, safe ako. Or anxiety-driven need for autonomy. Priestly relationships are mere camaraderie of cliques, or just simply drinking buddies, or functionalism. I have to relate because I have to. This is part of my social function. Or lack of episcopal leadership that foments cohesion and unity among priests, especially those marginalized priests in the presbyterate. Okay? Later on, we can discuss these things. We can deepen this. I know that my work as a keynote speaker is just simply to stimulate discussion. My work here is just simply to stir up some thoughts, some emotions for our facilitated conversation later on. Okay. Now, the path of honest self-appraisal is very important to grow in intimate friendship with one another. The pathway to growth, to intimate friendship, comes through honest self-disclosure. That is, the risk to be vulnerable. When I am honest with myself, I have begun to water the seeds of deep, authentic friendship. Intimate friendship is about being real and taking off the masks and personas that keep ourselves and others at a distance. We discover the true self, that our true self grows not in isolation, never in isolation, but in and through relationships. Thus, we commit to nurturing relationships through time and mutual sharing. Intimate friendship with others presupposes a level of self-knowledge and self-intimacy that provides the atmosphere for more authentic sharing of self. If I am not in touch with my thoughts, with my feelings, with my emotions, even with what is going on with me, with my behaviors, the question is, how am I to reveal my true self? Okay? And then finally, the beginning of change starts when we recognize our need for others. We grow in deep, authentic friendship, in intimate friendship with each other, challenges us to recognize the ways in which the culture and society has presented us with false images of true manhood, and to reclaim our God-given capacities for openness, compassion, and authentic connections. Just a nota bene, remember that real men are vulnerable. They are in touch with their own weaknesses. They are able to ask for help. They are able to feel their feelings, and they are able to express them tenderly without shame, and yet also appropriately. I'd like to end by reading to you a biblical text from John 17, 14 to 21. And it says, after Jesus said this, he looked around toward heaven and prayed, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that your Son may glorify you. I am coming to you now, but I say these things while I am still in the world, so that they may have the full measure of my joy within them. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, for they are not of the world, any more than I am of the world. My prayer is that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. For them, I sanctify myself, that they too may be truly sanctified. My prayer is not for them alone, but I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am with you, may they also be one, be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them, even as you have loved me. I think I still have 15 minutes, and I'm open for questions. Questions, reactions, or thoughts? We have, I think, females, no? Women on the floor. We would appreciate if they would also ask and react. Knowing
Those who would like to have reactions and questions, please raise your hand. Anyone? Yes,
Sige po,
Father.
Father Junald from Cebu.
Jonald from Cebu. I'm interested with your intimate sacramental relationship with the other priest. Because there's also a subculture that if our brother priests see you together almost every time, they'll be thinking of, you know,
Something is wrong.
yeah.
Yes.
Thank
okay.
you.
Well, particular friendships. You know, we're talking about that, and I think in seminar formation. Look at it in this way. Jesus has 12 disciples, right? But he is fondly, he is fond of Peter, James, and John. And John said he is the beloved. What do you think about that? It's amazing, right? It's amazing. Remember that intimate relationship with others requires a certain kind of affective maturity, a certain kind of, even of spiritual maturity in your part. I think we cannot move into intimate relationship with others if there is no a certain level of psychological and spiritual maturity on your part. What do I mean when I say psychological maturity? Well, you know yourself. Basically, you know yourself, and you're able to manage yourself. When you are in a relationship, you know what's your sexual orientation, and whatever others are saying, I don't care. I know who am I. Okay? Of course, when we talk about healthy celibate relationship, we're talking about a delicate dance between boundary and intimacy. Okay? If you'd like to know more, attend the course on human sexuality. Okay? Thank you.
Some more? Yes, Father Am.
Father Am.
I'm Father Amihares from the Diocese of Calibano. I would like to ask some light from Father Noel regarding these subcultures. No?
Yes.
Diocesan and the presbyteral subcultures, and I could cite 3. No? If I remembered well, you said about this, of course, the bishop, the weakness of the bishop, etc. But then the second one is the kind of fraternal gathering which could lead to gossips, slanders. No?
Yes, that's true.
And then because of the weakness of the bishop, those around him is the palakasan, papel, palapad ng papel.
Yes.
If I remembered well.
Yes, pasip-sipan. No?
Pasip-sipan.
Pasip-sip.
These are, I think, related realities that could happen in any diocese. Now, I am at a loss if there are gossipers, I would say, maybe myself included. How could priests be helped to refrain that, in a sense, that he will not create another clique? Because this one, pasip-sipan, and then we create another clique. And then there will be 2 cliques, and then there will be another 3 cliques.
That's true.
And therefore, I don't know what is the key for this. No? Is it the bishop? It is among us clergy? Or it is, I don't know, a dialogue? I don't know. I need some light for this. Thank you, Father.
I know, Father Am, that you will ask a difficult question. But my confidence is to be able to say, I do not know. Okay? I think what I'm saying here is, we really don't offer an easy answer to all this. I don't want even to give, almost like a canned answer for all situations, and as if this answer would solve our problems. We will open it to the body. Hopefully, it would it would spur some more discussions. But what we are also offering here is that precisely we need ongoing formation, because there are subculture in our particular dioceses that are actually counterproductive to our priestly life and ministry and to our relationship with each other. It's a hard toll. No? And hopefully we would continue to pursue that dilemma because we know it's a reality. Okay, Father Am, thank you. Thank you.
By the way, this is a working snack.
Working snap again.
Working break, I mean.
Okay.
Yes, Bishop.
Pwede ba, Obispo, magtanong?
Sure, Bishop. And if I do not know, I will say, refer to Bishop Afable.
Yeah, I remember as a seminarian, as a young priest, I came across this book. I think it was authored by John Powell. And the title of the book was Ministry Requires Intimacy. And that really caught my attention as a seminarian, as a young priest. And so eventually I realized the struggle and the difficulties and the obstacles in the presbyteral sacramental intimacy.
Yes.
And then after 25 years as a priest, diocesan priest, I was nominated to become a bishop. And the more I realized that if there is a struggle among priests in fraternal intimacy, sacramental, even more so among us bishops.
Oh yes, Bishop. I have sat with the CBCP
Yes.
meeting and
Yeah.
I think that's true.
And so when I joined that Best Wine Served Last for senior clergy, one of the programs of Galilee Center, since they didn't have any program for bishops, I almost pressured them to accept me to join that
Yes.
program. And so I was the only bishop. And there were 8 other priests, diocesan priests and religious priests in our group. And through those days, it was really an amazing, wonderful, and yet excruciating experience having to listen to 8 priests talking about or talking against their bishops and their superiors.
Yes, yes.
And I was the only one. I could not talk against the priests because I would be smothered by them, no? But anyway, my point really is, remember the bishops are like you. And we are continuing in our search and for the amazing grace to work with us, in us, with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop, for sharing.
Yes, Father.
Before Father would say, I just would like to comment no yung word of intimacy. It's not only on the new ratio. When Ratio was talking about intimate friendship in the priesthood, there was actually a reference to an older document. And do you know what document it was referring to? Presbyterorum Ordinis. So Presbyterorum Ordinis in 1963 was already using the word intimacy in our friendship. No? So I just would like to say that. I think that's important.
Father, I'm from Amando Litana from Pasig.
Yes.
I'm not here to give an advice to the bishops and to the priests. There are breakthroughs and initiatives in the many places or dioceses that we are belonging. I have in the diocese where I belong, there are priests who are really intimate. What I do as a priest, brothers to them, I just commend and appreciate the relationship. Because they can grow and they can be an example to those who are becoming priests in the future. It is to appreciate on my part on the way they become intimate as brothers. They become not exclusively on their own, but they can also be an inspiration to other priests and to the seminarians we have. So my point is appreciating their closeness, their intimacy as brother priests as a good example.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay.
More hands. Yes.
Father J.
Cynthia raises. Okay, next.
Father, because you said that in the past, intimacy was not used by the church. And it goes along that in the seminary formation, it is also not dealt with. So sa akin, sa ngayon, if we really are very conscious of this already, this should already be very an important topic in seminary formation, initial formation. Pag-uusapan na dapat yun, na dapat we are brother priests and we don't take it for granted. And then in the ongoing formation, again, it should be discussed again and again and again. Kasi otherwise, yung culture na, negative culture na yan, continues. It has to stop. And I think we can do it.
Well, this is about initial formation, ano? But I just would like to say this, basing from my experience with young clergy and the older clergy. You know, I said earlier that healthy, intimate and healthy celibate relationship is about an intricate dance between intimacy and boundaries. Ang formation ng mga older generations like us, we are more on the boundary side. Very rigid ang boundaries natin. Ano? Kaya hindi tayo intimate. We're not more in touch with ourselves and ang problema is when we reach midlife, doon tayo inaatake ng intimacy needs natin. Ang mga bata naman, they are very intimate, they are very in touch with themselves, they are very expressive. No? Pero kulang sila sa boundaries. No? Kulang naman sila sa boundaries. I think we need to be mindful that this is really a balance between these two. Sa human formation, yes.
Ma'am Cynthia.
Ma'am Cinch.
Good morning,
Good morning, Nancy.
Father Noel, for your feminine voice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
No, I was just thinking two things.
Okay.
Year in, year out. This is my 30th year in formation. So I have my claim to fame is you were once upon a
Yes.
foreman.
Yes.
With us. Anyway, year in, year out, there's always this thing about gossiping. Everybody seems to be expressing how unhealthy that is and expressing to stop that culture. But until now, it hasn't. Number two, I'd like to share an experience some time ago in small group sharing among priests. There were two priests who were of different. One was very rigid, very defensive, very quiet. The other one was over-friendly, outgoing, etc. And in the disclosure, in the small group, the one who was very quiet and very defensive disclosed that he was afraid to interact very much because they might discover his homosexual orientation. It was disclosed in the small group. And so this other priest was outgoing, very friendly, and etc. also disclosed that his difficulty was he could not foster boundaries, and so he always ends up with unhealthy relating with women, heterosexual orientation. You know what beautiful thing happened during that disclosure was that they agreed to help each other. The one who had difficulty with boundary said, I'll help you, get out of your defenses and all of that, but please help me also to be able to put boundaries. And fast forward several years, I've seen them, and they said they continue to support each other, and they have really developed a very healthy, wonderful growing up together, coming from that disclosure to how they are now. And that's a span of several years.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That seems to be a beautiful story to learn from. No,
Yes,
it
Father.
requires a lot of vulnerability and respect. But thank you for sharing that.
Sa tanan nga atong gipanghisgotan, no, sa lahat na pinag-usapan natin, for me, what is to be looked into is our own brokenness and vulnerability and woundedness. Kasi in all our stages in life, it will be presented, it will be handled. So we cannot go into intimacy not unless we are being brought back into our inner goodness, beauty, and truth. No, then we can start talking about the grace of God, and I think that is the centerpiece of our formation. No, to be able to see the grace of God in us. Because if we approach one another, if we have in our relationship with one another, and also approach our work from the perspective of our vulnerability, no, so dili kayo tapesful. But if we go back into the peace within us, no, our own inner goodness, that is the seat of the grace of God, then I think we can start, moving into a close, intimate relationship. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. No, I just would like to affirm that too. That when people are really in touch with themselves, both the weak part and the good part, they become very understanding of other people too. No, and that usually is the fruit of ongoing formation
No, I'm sorry.
programs. Yes.
We still have time during the facilitated conversation. So while setting up the facilitated conversation, let's have a health break.
We have a 15-minute break.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
souvenir. Libre na lang, libre. Para iusin niya. Wala na po yung na-print na picture.
Good morning. Announcements. Sa mga pari po na hindi pa nakapapicture sa booth, pwede po kayong magpa-picture. It's free. It's for the souvenir. And then, yung mga nakapapicture na kahapon, available na yung photos nyo. Pwede nyo kunin from the documentation committee. Thank you.
come to me and keep me safe in your arms. Strengthen me to face the day, for you I stand.
Even if the sadness takes